Welcome to the Wild West, which in Norway means fjord after fjord after fjord. And they all do look like they're taken out of a postcard. And for me to be able to get here, I traversed the largest continuous mountain range in the whole country in this 51-year-old Land Rover that I've built from scratch as my first ever restoration project. And the water you can see behind me is for the first time in a week sea level. And the mountains is probably somewhere around 1,000 meters. And this car has now been climbing up and down this kind of elevation for days now. The wind right now is and instead of driving around these mountains, we've had a lot of mountain passes going over them. And in the Land Rover Discovery, the car I used to travel with before, a drive like this would not be something to even write home about. But I'm now traveling with a car twice my age, with an engine producing a whopping 74 horses, and with 4 gears so straightly cut that it sounds like you're driving in reverse the whole time. And the more facts I list about the car, the less appealing it might sound to a lot of you. But I love traveling with this car so much that I'm actually going to cross the whole country with it. And that's just for starters. But in typical Norwegian fashion, there's some weather approaching, and I'm also not camping here because this is an industrial site. And it might look like wasted space, but this is a hydro plant for electricity. So instead of staying here, I'm heading further into the valley. It's a real shame I couldn't find a spot with a nice view, but I'll survive. However, there's absolutely zero phone reception up here, which is a plus because less people. But I can't check the weather forecast. But looking at the clouds, I'm pretty certain there's going to be some sort of rain later on. Never mind, it's raining a lot already. So I tied this down in a different way so it can drain itself. And then we'll see how this is tomorrow. So I'll set up the tarp, the table, and cook a proper meal tonight. Yeah, that's good enough. The water in the fjord at the start of the episode is not drinkable because it's a mix between glacial water, runoff from the mountains, and salt water. But luckily I can fill this up kind of close. I think I was right about the weather approaching. Might actually put on some pants. You can now clearly see that the rain is 3 hills over there. So I'll put on some pants and eat my food whilst it's still warm, and we'll see how good I actually secured the tarp. I've finished my meal, I've done the dishes, and it's still raining. But at the bottom of the valley right now, there's a break in the clouds, and there's a sunset that might be heading this way. It looks like the sun is going behind that mountain right there, and I won't see it until tomorrow, but the lighting is really nice nevertheless. The weather down here is much more of a breeze, at least if I compare to what I've had the last days higher up. So I actually think I'll just leave this out until sunrise. I might end up eating those words for breakfast, but what's the worst that could happen? Knock on wood. Actually, knock on wood. And luckily I've already made my bed because it's starting to rain again, and this time it actually looks like proper rain. So I guess this is the end of the outdoorsy part of the day, and I'll get back into the car, get out the laptop, do some work. It's much more enjoyable down here because last night it was probably -2 degrees during the evening, so working on the laptop is therefore not as cozy, but now it's probably somewhere between 10 and 15 plus, which is actually a very nice temperature because it's not too warm and it's not too cold. The rain started to come down a lot quicker than what I actually thought, and it also started to come down a lot more than what I thought. So I did adjust the tarp so it's able to drain itself over the night, and I'll still fire up the laptop and do some actual work now. But just listen to the sound of this. I for sure made the right decision not taking down the tarp last night. There's been basically no wind, but a lot of rain. So when I got out, I was able to make a warm cup of coffee and mashed potatoes without having to set up a tarp or do it inside of the car. But I were planning on hiking even further into the valley towards the waterfalls, but as of right now, everything is really wet and slippery, which makes the path kind of sketchy, so I'll have to take a rain check, quite literally. And the series is still somewhat waterproof in heavy rain, apart from this, which is a very common area, and it only leaks when I'm parked on a forward slope, resulting in this pool in the footwell, so I'll see if there's something I can do about that. And with this kind of weather, there's not really that much for me to do here, so I'll pack up, drive back into town, pick up some food, and check the weather forecast for the next few days, and make a decision on if I should retry this hike or do something else. Something completely different now from last week is I can actually tear down a camp like this in rain because the functioning heater does dry out the jacket and freeze up the visibility out of the windshield. So that's a huge upgrade, although it is the bare minimum. But if you've ever had a car with a defect heater, you will 100% understand how nice it is to get it back after living without it for some time. There's been a ton of rain coming down the last 24 hours, and the river, which yesterday was completely crystal clear blue water, is now fully brown because all of the extra water is bringing down a lot of sediment from the mountains and hillsides. I drove down into town because I wanted to check if this was a passing thing or if it was going to last like this the whole week. And whilst there, I also took the opportunity to pack up on some food. But then I ended up driving back here because in about 1 hour the rain will stop, supposedly, and we'll end up with normal grey weather without all of the downpour. And this microphone is probably picking up a lot of extra noise from the river, but also the waterfall surrounding this entire valley. But to a normal human ear, the sound down in this valley is actually kind of nice. And there's not really anything I can do about all of the rain or the noise from it for that matter. But tomorrow morning, if everything goes as planned, I'll be able to do some hiking up further into the valley. And tonight I'll just make some food and relax in a even more sheltered camp than last night. I walked down to the river to check out if the water was as bad as I thought, and it was honestly not that bad. But I'll save my drinking water and use this to boil eggs instead. The only difference is there might be some sand in the water, and I really don't think my boiling eggs will mind. And the reason why I didn't bring any more drinking water is because yesterday at this very same spot, water was abundant. But right now I would at least need a sand filter to be able to drink it, which is something I don't have. But all of the water coming down here is still very pure, so I wouldn't take any harm drinking it. But since I don't have to drink it, I'd rather pass. And there's also been a few people asking about this tarp setup, which is really not something I would recommend. But the reason I'm running this setup is because it's really cheap and really lightweight. This is a probably €10 eBay tarp, and the same for the large one. But because they are so cheap, I can have a backup for both of them, and I can just set it up however I feel like without having a full awning with the cost and the extra weight of that. So it's really it is what it is kind of thing. This is not something really fancy, but it really does the job. And in my earlier travels with Discovery, people asked why I wanted to travel with -degrees and snow outside. And it's because there's actually less logistics behind camping in snow than there is camping in rain. Everything from camera gear to the car to just being able to stand outside without getting soaked is a lot easier with sub-0 degrees. But after rain, there's always sun. Sometimes. The sun rose several hours ago. 5 hours to be precise. But yet there's still no direct sunlight down in this valley. But right now it's about 30 minutes away because I can actually see the outline of the sun right behind that hill. And by the looks of it, the weather will be like this the entire day. So I've actually changed my hiking plans to something else. Because now that the weather is a lot more predictable for several hours, I'll hike up to the lake, feeding that waterfall. And whilst waiting for some direct sunlight, I'm filling up with some oatmeal. Might get something warm to drink because it's still less than 10 degrees now. And since I knew the sun was coming this morning, I've spent the first hours of the day in bed just listening to audiobooks because it's a lot nicer getting up right before the sun hits the valley instead of standing here for 5 hours just waiting. But I'm still in no rush to do this hike because the sun doesn't really set until 11 o'clock, and after that it's not even that dark. One of the most positive things with being further up into the mountains is the mosquito season hasn't really started up there yet. But down here in this really moist valley, it for sure has. And sunny days, of course, also means sunscreen. And it looks like I'm ready to start hiking just as the sun hits the valley, which is perfect timing. Midsummer is probably something to avoid, but right now, some extra warmth is actually a positive. I think the first hour of this hike is nothing but me just hiking inside of a bushy birch forest. But as soon as it levels out on top, I'm kind of certain the view is going to be worth it. I'm now up above the lake, which is feeding the largest waterfall at the beginning of the hike, but I'll continue further in because there's a glacier behind this mountain, so I'll just hike up there and see how far we go from there. And this is as far as I'll hike today, because this is not a good place to be if the weather suddenly switches over to really bad weather, which is quite common when the wind is moving this fast. Down to the left you can see a lake which is dammed up in the end of the valley above where I camped, just way higher up. And above that last hill is a blue ice crevasse falling down, filling up that lake. And all the way above those snow peaks there is a huge ice cap, but it's kind of hard to see the difference between the clouds and the snow cap. But I'll just hike a bit further down to get shelter from the weather before I can eat some lunch and do the final descent back to camp. And here is the end of the valley I'm camping in, with the dam construction being up there. A lot of the trail are passing these kind of rock slides, but these are in a couloir, so I'm kind of certain that it's from snow slides at the end of the season, but it's kind of smart to mind your step, because in these everything is pretty loose and there's no real path here. And like everything else which is exposed like this, taking it slow is preferred. There's no such thing as looking cool in the mountains. And I made it down just in time to take down the tarp because the wind has followed me the whole way down the mountain and has now reached this camp. I guess all of this wind was my cue to leave. There was also an Italian couple showing up in a camper van, and I offered them my flat level campground because I might as well leave. So now the first thing on the agenda is to fill this up, drink at least 2 of these before I can actually start to plan something for a camp tonight. It's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which means I have plenty of time. I really wanted something salty and savory after that hike, so I bought some bacon, among other things. And this is the camp for tonight. And it's yet another spot right next to the road, but this is definitely not the main road. This paved road leads to a gravel road, which then again leads to a zigzag going all the way up to the top of that mountain plateau again. So I might drive up there tomorrow. But truth be told, when you're traveling continuously, not everything has to be an adventure. And sometimes it's nice to just stop right next to the road and sleep there, especially when everything looks like this. And my closest and only neighbor for the night is this river. But when you are camping next to the road like this, it's nice to be a good sport about it and not pull out every single camping item and awning that you own and just keep it to yourself in the car. So tonight I'll just make some food right now at the back of the car. Then I'll cover up the windows, get into bed, work on the laptop, and not make any more out of myself. And if you're not a good sport about places like this, they usually get closed off with rocks blocking the entry or a gate. So just pick up your trash, leave the place as you found it, and don't treat it like your own home, because it's not. It may not be much, but it's a heck of a lot better than oatmeal and mashed potatoes every single day. But I am trying to cut costs of life, because the more money I save, the more money I can spend on petrol, which then again means the more places I get to see. And Norway might be one of the more expensive countries to travel in, so I'd rather cut costs on food, spend money on petrol, and do that hike to the top of a mountain, which is completely free.